Hello, you are tuned in to Erekose on Doctor Who on YouTube. Here we will cover pretty much anything Doctor Who, spin-off shows from Doctor Who itself, old Doctor Who, anything goes, anything at all, people. I will talk about all kinds of Doctor Who here with you. So if you have any comments, questions, anything that you just want to just talk about or, ask me a question about, because I do have an extensive history with Doctor Who. I've seen pretty much everything that's available. So, like I said, I encourage feedback and comments and questions, so please do so. And I just wanted to introduce you to my friend here, Minnie Handles, who will be in
Hello
my
there,
videos.
folks. How you doing? We're here today to talk a little bit about Doctor Who. I was inspired to do this video because of something that was sent to me by a supporter of me over on my other channel, of course, on Erekose Making a Murder, and also over here on Doctor Who. Anyways, this person sent me something really cool. So to set this up, today we're going to be talking about Ark in Space, which was actually voted to be one of the fan favorites when they decided they were going to start putting Doctor Who stories out. Like at the time it was VHS, and I think even beta at the beginning. The first story that they went ahead and made available for people to buy on VHS or whatever was Ark in Space. It basically was voted like a fan favorite. So they went with that one first, right? And it is a really, really cool story, really fun story. I like it for a lot of reasons, particularly the beginning. The companions for this one are Sarah Jane and Harry. Harry he's a Navy doctor. He gets into the TARDIS with the Doctor at the end of the previous story, and he's just talking all this madness, like, oh yeah, right, this thing isn't going to go anywhere or do anything, whatever. I'll walk in there if you insist, because it just looks like a telephone box to him. And he's like, oh, how are we all going to fit in there? So he eventually walks in at the end of that episode, and you hear him going, oh, wow, what is, and he starts, saying funny things. And so at the open of Ark in Space, it's funny because now they are landing. They're on this, space station, basically, right? And you see the TARDIS. You hear the TARDIS sound, and you see it, materializing here on this station. And you hear the Doctor and Harry having a, back and forth, basically. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that, you ham-fisted, numbskulled idiot, or whatever. And so as they're getting out of the TARDIS there, or whatever, they're kind of arguing, and he's like, look, I didn't know it was going to do anything, and it would just, I didn't know it would affect anything. It was just a knob or whatever. And he goes, why? What happened? He goes, well, the Doctor's looking around, right? He's looking at the technology. He's kind of gauging it all. He goes, well, I gauge we're about 5,000 years in your Earth's future. And immediately Harry, the Navy doctor, is just like, what? Oh, you're crazy. But yet he's looking around at a space station, right? Which is, and all he did was walk into a police box, right? And now they're on a space station. But anyways, he's like, oh, that's crazy. We couldn't be 5,000 years in our future or whatever, right? And the Doctor looks at Harry, and this is the best part. And it's right at the beginning too. He looks at Harry. It's Tom Baker too, because Tom Baker is seriously one of the best doctors, seriously, to this day, in my opinion. And he looks at Harry, and he gives him this kind of look where he's like, oh, well, Harry, you did give that helmet regulator quite a turn. And it's, oh, jeez. It cracks me up every time I hear Tom Baker say that to Harry in that episode. So anyway, it's a great story. It's about this Ark that's in space in our future, in the Earth's future. And it's basically all the best of humanity, all paired to be compatible to start a colony somewhere else so that the colony would have the best probability for success. And so there was a lot of engineering that went into it and all these things. Anyways, so it's basically the future of the human race, right? And accumulated human knowledge, right? Because they also have extensive libraries that they also preserved from Earth, and that sort of stuff. So it's like this Ark. Well, it's been invaded by this insect life form, and it has turned a couple of the people actually in stasis on board, has turned them into basically like larvae of what species it is. And so it goes on to it's bad news, and so the Doctor and Sarah Jane and Harry have to figure out what to do about it. It's a really cool episode. At one point, the Doctor connects himself with the brain of the dead insect creature to try to read like its last thoughts or its last impressions at death and all that stuff. And he starts to actually get a little buggy and starts, not acting like the Doctor for a minute, but he shakes it off. But it's funny. It's a fun story. Even down to the very end of it, when one of the guys who works at the station ends up sacrificing his life and telling the Doctor to get on board the ship, and the Doctor says, "Oh no," and he knocks the Doctor out, and he goes, "Doctor, you got to listen to me because you don't want trouble with the work technicians union." Or whatever. Basically, it's like a little joke or whatever. But so it's just a cool little moment in Doctor Who. So there's a lot of things about Ark in Space that are really awesome, which brings me to my main point for this video, which is there's another thing in this episode that I really, really love that's really, really funny, and it's when Harry and the Doctor are avoiding a laser beam that's trying to kill them. There's like a robot, and whenever it senses, they figured out whenever it senses anything organic, it's not even just sensing heat, like body heat, any organic material it will fire at. And so they find out this because they're hiding behind a desk, right? And then if they ever try to poke anything out, it shoots at it. So at one point the Doctor, raises up the scarf on a little poker thing, and he's like raising it, and it hits the laser hits the scarf, and it like burns up the scarf pretty bad or whatever. And he's like, he goes, "Oh my God, that's my scarf." He's like, "I love that scarf." He said, "I got that scarf from Lady Nostradamus, a witty little knitter," he says, and I swear it cracks me up every single time. And I have to admit that recently I was sent a gift from a friend of mine in Scotland, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, and so I had to show everybody in the video because I gotta say it's quite a witty little piece of knitting, to be perfectly honest. So you get everything kind of just pointing. So this was sent to me by my good friend Sharon over in Scotland, and it's basically knitted, and I think you can all tell what it is. Right? So here's our little Dalek eye up here. Exterminate! Exterminate! And then inside there, inside there, you can see for emergency Dr. Pepper storage inside the Dalek, right? Anyway, so that's a witty little piece of knitting by my good friend Sharon there, and it got me thinking. I would love to have a big, huge, oversized scarf, just like the one Tom Baker wears, or like one of the ones he wears, I guess I should say. But I would love to have that. So, Sharon, I don't know. I just wanted to go ahead and ask you if you would be interested in trying to do that. And if you are, I'm more than happy to send you money for materials and shipping to get it to me. So let me know. I can PayPal that, no problem. And no rush on it. I know sometimes you have some limitations as to how much you can work, and I understand. So no rush on it. But let me know what you think, because I would love to get one when I do these videos. And I'll have to go out and go find me a good, nice trench coat, nice Tom Baker-esque trench coat to kind of go along with it. So, but if you're interested, Sharon, let me know, because I would love for it to be from you, my witty little knitter. So that's why I brought up Ark in Space, because in that episode he talks about Lady Nostradamus being a witty little knitter. And I just thought it was so funny, but I also wanted to just show off. I mean, I just thought it was so cool when I opened this up. This came, and I opened this up. I just was like really impressed, like how, you know, it's so much looks like a Dalek, and I just think that's really cool. So anyway, so that's why I wanted to talk about that. But I also wanted to talk about a couple other things too. You know, like for people maybe that don't know, like some of the things that you need to go and see in old Who, you know, that I think are important, you know, and I think Ark in Space is one of those because it introduces you to the sleepers, which is what the people on the Ark get referred to as later on in the classic Who kind of, you know, basically they're the plot lines there. So they eventually get referred to as the sleepers, and they're an important thing. I think it's important to try, if you can, go back and get your hands on Tomb of the Cybermen. It's a Patrick Troughton story. It's black and white. Patrick Troughton, who is the second Doctor, it's the first story with the Cybermen, and I think it's interesting, and I think it's a good kind of thing for people to understand where the Cybermen came from, how they came about. Another one would be Genesis of the Daleks, which is a Tom Baker story, and that is basically where Tom Baker and it's Harry and Sarah Jane again, and they end up at the Dalek homeworld just as the Daleks are being invented by Davros. So that's interesting. Another big ones that you want to probably catch, you know, I gotta recommend, you know, The Deadly Assassin. Another Tom Baker story. It's actually been it's actually also rated the most popular story, Doctor Who story in classic Who universe as well. And it's basically the first time in the show's history that they actually showed the Doctor going home to Gallifrey. Now there was at the end of Troughton, the second Doctor, at the end of Troughton's time as the Doctor, he actually did call the Time Lords to deal with something in an episode called the War Gamers. The situation was so beyond help that he had no other choice literally than to call upon the help of the Time Lords to sort the whole thing out. And in that process, he was picked up by them. And that's why, as Pertwee, he ends up spending the next few years where the Doctor's basically stuck on Earth. He gets off and he gets out and ends up on some other places, on other, you know, just through some weird things like dimensional things and whatever, or because another alien comes to Earth and he ends up using some of their portals or something. But basically, for the most part, it's all basically centered on Earth, and you know, so and Doctor becomes kind of a James Bond. So that's what happens during the third Doctor, Pertwee, is that it's all kind of like the Doctor is James Bond here on Earth, working for UNIT. Which is another important thing to understand. UNIT, the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, you know, it's through UNIT that he meets Sarah Jane. It's through UNIT he meets Harry, the Navy Doctor Harry. You know, UNIT is, you know, a big deal in the Who universe, along with Colonel Lethbridge Stewart. So there's interesting and interesting episodes to see in the Pertwee era. That I would suggest maybe trying to take a look at. Then you move into Tom Baker, like I said, Deadly Assassin, Ark in Space, are huge ones. Deadly Assassin, like as I was saying before, is the first one where the Doctor goes home to Gallifrey, and we see an episode, and it's all taking place on Gallifrey, and we get to see some of Time Lord culture and that sort of thing. It's the first time that it ever happened, and so that was always a big episode, and it was also made very, very great because it was once again the Master. It was the Master that was doing something, and the Doctor was there and having to, you know, stop the Master and whatever. And so it's a really, really good episode. that I highly recommend. And then if we move on from there, there's a lot of Tom Baker episodes that are really, really great. During his time, he ended up picking up, I think it was after Deadly Assassin, they kind of like forced him to take Romana with him. And so, because Romana wanted to be able to learn, and that sort of thing or whatever, right? So that's what she wanted. She wanted to be able to get into a real TARDIS and that sort of thing. So she ends up, they end up kind of, getting him to agree, and she ends up becoming one of his favorite companions. And so there's the whole time with Romana, which among that, there is the Key to Time, which is six different stories, which I think are all about 4 to 6 episodes each. And a lot of really cool, really cool idea. It's just the Key to Time, and it introduces the idea of the White Guardian and the Black Guardian, which would basically essentially be like good or evil, or the god or the devil, or those sort of things, right? So you get to see the White Guardian, the Black Guardian. That idea is introduced for the first time there with Tom Baker, and that moves on through Peter Davidson era. Those of you who remember, he's the guy in the like yellow and it's like a cricket uniform, and then it moves on to Colin Baker, who is one of my favorites. You remember him because he has the big loud jacket with various types of plaid and green and yellow and red and all just very loud, that very loud jacket. Then you have Sylvester McCoy with a very eccentric jacket as well, but maybe not so much as Colin Baker's was. Anyway, I always liked Colin Baker. Colin Baker, I felt he was just like the arrogant prick as the Doctor. He was just very, very, still a good guy, but still very full of himself. As Colin Baker, the Doctor was very consumed with his own vanity and self-image, but was still a good guy. Whereas I think it was less so with like Tom Baker or Davidson or any of the other Doctors. But Colin Baker he did a Doctor that was just very, very, just cocky and all that sort of stuff. And so I always dug that about Colin Baker. Thought it was so. There was good episodes from Colin Baker's era. One that I would suggest is Remembrance of the Daleks. It's very, very interesting. He ends up going to this one planet to go to a funeral for a friend of his. But when he gets to this planet and gets to this place where the funeral and the memorial is held and stuff, he ends up finding trouble. Not good. What he ends up finding Daleks, Davros, that sort of stuff. And so it gets real, nutty. But the really cool thing about that story that I think is important, because it did permeate into New Who, into the news, reboot, and that is that Davros, and you saw this at the end of Genesis of the Daleks as well, right? But you just saw it there, and that was it. That was the end of that story, right? So they fleshed this out more, where you see in Remembrance of the Daleks, where the Doctor's interacting with the Daleks and Davros and stuff, and he's basically figuring out that Davros is a prisoner of the Daleks. That the Daleks are just suffering his existence because he's the creator, and he was able to bring them back. Because the Doctor had essentially wiped them out at the end of Genesis of the Daleks. What he had done had essentially wiped them out. But the only way they were able to go on was because, as Davros did in the new reboot, was by giving of his own self, right? To create a new race of Daleks. I will say the Cult of Skaro, the four Daleks that make up the Cult of Skaro, that was an idea that I don't remember ever seeing in Classic Who myself, but I actually did like it in the reboot. So that was interesting. But I don't know. There's a lot of good Doctor Who stories out there, I think, that are good to get a good fundamental understanding of the lore and the way the show is and how it kind of works and stuff. But those are all really good ones, because I think, especially any time the Doctor goes back to Gallifrey, and he does it a couple times. Tom Baker himself goes back, I think, two or three times. We have Colin Baker goes back to Gallifrey because he goes there for Trial of a Time Lord, where he's actually in Time Lord court with a judge, and he's actually arguing against the Valeyard, and the Valeyard is actually a future incarnation of the Doctor, the final of the, you have 13 as a Time Lord. Now the Doctor's been given a new set. We can go into explaining that later, but if you remember all the stuff with the crack during the Matt Smith time, Matt Smith was going to be the end. He was the 13th incarnation because Tennant had taken up 2. Although there is some discrepancy because the War Doctor would have been one too, and I think maybe some people over at Doctor Who didn't quite think out the math on this properly. But anyway, Matt Smith was supposed to be the final incarnation, but as he was dying, Amy Pond was making her pleading to the crack, to the Time Lords, that if they had any chance at all in the world, then they have it because of the Doctor, and that if they can do anything to help him, that they should. And then they actually did. They actually sent through a new set of regenerations for the Doctor through the crack, because they were able to send that through, and then the Doctor was able to get a whole new set of regenerations now. One thing they've gotten away from with the new reboot is there was often a problem with the Doctor's regeneration. Like, he would, at first, it didn't always, like, he didn't just immediately, well, I guess they kind of did with David Tennant, where they showed that period where he was sleeping and in bed, and they were trying to help him, and Rose and Mickey were going down and shopping, and then getting attacked by the Christmas tree and all that stuff, and it's like it took him a while to, like, wake up and, boom. But, like, with other Doctors, it's been a thing where, like, it would take some time for them to really, like, start acting like the Doctor again. They would always have these weird quirks, like things that were strange, and, like, it generally always took them a little bit of time to settle in. And that was always an interesting aspect that they seem to have gotten away from now. There was no real transition, or anything, or any problems when he became Matt Smith, when the Doctor became, Matt Smith. There was no real problem when, Matt Smith then regenerated into, Capaldi. Capaldi pretty much went, straight forward. There was no real, downtime. But in Classic Who, it was pretty much every time. Like, Pertwee, at the beginning of him, basically, because Troughton ends with the War Gamers, and then Pertwee begins. They show the TARDIS, like, crashed on Earth. They showed Pertwee, climbing out of it. So that's a new Doctor. Everybody's like, oh wow, a new Doctor, and then that's in. He's stuck on Earth because the Time Lords have taken his dematerialization circuit, so the TARDIS can no longer dematerialize and materialize anywhere else. So that's why he's stuck on Earth. He's stranded on Earth, and he can't do anything about it so long as the Time Lords are choosing to hold on to his dematerialization circuit. So that's why he ends up becoming like James Bond, the Doctor as James Bond, helping UNIT and just anywhere on Earth to try to defeat, problems, issues, things like that. He becomes like a scientific advisor. Sometimes he's having to actually help fight enemies and stuff as the Doctor, it is. You know how it goes. Obviously, they have to have, an enemy in the story and all that stuff, right? Something to get the kids cowering behind the couch going, oh my God! Right? So, anyway. So, hey, look, I love Doctor Who. Those are, I think, some of the really high points I think people would want to hit. I would suggest checking out Time in the Rani. Like I said, female Time Lord villain, but way less intense of a villain than like the Master is. Okay? Because the Rani's basically just a mad scientist, and she doesn't, and she's not interested in like domination of the cosmos or time or anything else. She just she's into her science projects, even though they're immoral and crazy and weird. But she's into those, and so the Doctor ends up having to come in and stop because she's usually exploiting somebody to be able to do what she wants to do, and so he always has to put an end to it. Anyway, Time in the Rani is a good one for people, I think, to really see, and another female Time Lord besides Romana, and that sort of stuff. So Anyways, I've talked enough about Doctor Who for today. Look forward to, obviously, me and Cody doing some stuff here in the future regarding the newest season with Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. And, we'll be giving you our thoughts on that. So, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.